We did our project on Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is very common in the United States. There are about 5.8 million people living with the disease in 2020. It is the most common cause of dementia since it causes 60 to 80% of cases. The disease itself is characterized by loss of memory and decreased brain function. There are two types of Alzheimer's disease. These two are early onset familial Alzheimer's disease and late onset Alzheimer's disease. The first one is hereditary and the second one is not. FAD can be caused by gene mutations that are passed down in a family through blood from parent to offspring. These mutations in these hereditary cases are found in three specific genes that are called APP, PSEN1, and PSEN2. Changes in these genes consequently also change levels of a certain protein called amyloid beta peptide. With these mutations, high quantities of this protein begin to build up in the brain, form amyloid plaques, and start to damage nerve cells. On the other hand, late-onset Alzheimer's disease is not hereditary, but there is a certain factor that could run in families that can increase the risk of getting it. The APOE4 allele, also, when found in a person, is correlated to a higher risk of the disease. Someone could have this allele and not ever have the disease, but usually those with this allele have a greater risk. As far as genetic versus environmental goes, there is only one sign that is very well studied and proven to be correlated to the increased risk of getting the disease. This is the possession of the aforementioned E4 allele. The study states that it contributes to 40 to 70% of AD cases. Environmental factors that may help to cause the disease include homocysteine, vitamin B12, and cholesterol levels.
The 23andMe tests for a variety of different SNPs in Alzheimer's disease. There are two major SNPs that are tested for late-onset Alzheimer's, which are the APOE and the TREM2. The TREM2 is known to be one of the major leading concerns when developing Alzheimer's. TREM2 is identified by the impact it has on our chromosome 6, which is a R47H substitution. In other words, the genetic variation of the TREM2 having a substitution by the R47H will impact our protein's expression. It will encode the triggering receptor expressed on our myelin cells, which are cells that are produced in bone marrow. Studies have shown that the TREM2 is a major increase in developing Alzheimer's disease. A study was done over 131 families to test for certain genetics that would lead to Alzheimer's disease. In one of the families, 12 out of the 16 patients with Alzheimer's disease would carry the R47H. This would help support the role of the TREM2 receptor as an aggression protein that is compromised in the R47H, which will result in a speed up of Alzheimer's disease in each person. The 23andMe is known to be very efficient when testing for Alzheimer's disease. Currently, there are about 60,000 different SNPs that have been shown to be correlated with an individual developing Alzheimer's. However, 23andMe does not test for one important mutation that has a risk in developing Alzheimer's, which is the PSEN2 gene. This mutation affects the protein's function. The cells affected by this mutation are the neuroblastoma cells, ultimately resulting in a deleterious effect within the cells and thus allowing for the onset of Alzheimer's. Finally, while there is no definite evidence of how much one's risk for Alzheimer's increases when they have the gene, it is known that roughly between 18 to 50% of all familial Alzheimer's cases are likely to have the autosomal dominant genetic mutation.
Our SMP test will test for 60,000 genetic mutations and focus on both late and early stage Alzheimer's, such as looking for mutations in the PENS2 gene, such as PENS A85V. Our test versus 23andMe's test. Currently, 23andMe's genetic test for Alzheimer's disease mainly focuses on APOE and TREM2 genes, as mutations within both of these genes are commonly associated with late-stage Alzheimer's, such as APOE4. On the other hand, our test will test for 60,000 mutations and focus on both late and early stage Alzheimer's due to the PENS2 gene, which is associated with neuroblastoma cell degeneration in the mutation A85V. And this is a slide of cell degeneration in neuroblastoma cells.
Technically, over a quarter of people with Alzheimer's disease develop the disease from factors that are not related to genetics at all. Our test could easily say that you have no genetic risk of developing the disease, but your lifestyle and your environment lead you to develop the disease anyways. Also, more than 70% of the variants that determine phenotypic variation are in peripheral genes. Such genes have only indirect effects on expression, as a Science article explains. Our test can determine that you have multiple genes that have some sort of influence on developing Alzheimer's, yet the same genes we find can also have way less impact than other genes, meaning that there could be a false conclusion of developing the disease. In order to better mitigate these false conclusions, we will make sure to highlight the genetic variations that have higher influence on developing Alzheimer's and make sure there are proper explanations for each gene detected to better explain its individual risk. As previously mentioned, you can develop Alzheimer's regardless of genetics, which could further the argument that genetic testing isn't as useful or accurate to determine if someone will develop the disease. However, the vast majority of people want to know if they have Alzheimer's. About 89% want to know if they have the disease themselves, and 84% of people want to know if their partner has it as well. Also, cost to care for someone with Alzheimer's increases dramatically as a person ages, and costs are higher the later the person is diagnosed. Being able to plan ahead and prepare is the best way to care for someone with Alzheimer's in order to relieve stress, financial burden, and emotional strain. Our genetic testing can help with the planning and knowing the risk. It can help make sure you are prepared for future diagnosis and lead to a easier life for you and your family.